How is it going, Diablo player? So I have another build guide for you, which is going to be the Chain Lightning build, as many people have requested. This build plays pretty smooth. You can use it with Autocasting, and it has great single target and AoE clearing damage. It's great for speed farming the pit. I'm doing like tier 75 to tier 80s in speed farming, but you can definitely go a little bit higher. It's absolutely great for clearing tier 4 Infernal Hordes. As you can see, it also melts the council in seconds. It works great for the Tormented bosses. You can pretty much one-phase all Tormented bosses with this build just fine, and also Uber Lilith just melts down no problem. So we're playing this build as a hybrid. Since Splintering Energy is now nerfed and it only has a maximum of 12 lightning spears, we can pretty much achieve the 12 lightning spears in every build. In this build we're just gonna cast lightning spears and use the lightning spears from unstable currents, so we're gonna have enough lightning spears up to feed our Splintering Energy, and it just helps with AoE clearing capabilities. If you wanna do solely bossing, you can change the aspect for something like Lightning Rod or Inner Calm to do a little bit more single target damage, but overall if you wanna build an all-round build, it is better to just play it hybrid with the Splintering Energy aspect. So what we're doing in this build is just we're taking the Axial Conduit and we try to get a high roll on the resource regeneration aspect here, and then all we really need is just one single lucky hit to restore resource aspect together with the Static Surge legendary node makes us having no problems with resource whatsoever, and we can just permanently spam Chain Lightnings. Other than that, this build hasn't really changed from previous seasons. The Andariel version is pretty much dead because Air of Perdition is just way too strong of an item to ever replace it with something like Andariel's Visage. But you know, it is like it is. So as always, check the description of this video for all the sections of this guide and also for the planner link. This time again I have a tier 75 speed farm pit, I have a tier 4 Infernal Hordes, I have the Uber bosses and Uber Lilith, and I have Undercity for you at the end of the video. And also we have a section on how to put your Chain Lightning on autocast. I also got the changes for the new Shroud of False Death variant with Frostburns, which has just significantly higher pit pushing and boss damage, and you will also find a link to that in the description down below. So now, without further ado, let's start going into the actual guide, and we start as always with the skill tree. For the skills, just take any basic attack. We're not using it in the enchantment, so it really doesn't matter at all. Then we max out Chain Lightning into Greater Chain Lightning. We really never pretty much gonna use Destructive Chain Lightning anymore, since Crackling Energy is kind of useless in this iteration of the game. Its only use was pretty much to just give 15% extra damage from the Charge Glyph, but since nobody will ever use the Charge Glyph again, this passive is pretty much removed from the game. Then we put 3 into Elemental Dominance for the extra damage. Just 1 into Flame Shield, and then max out Teleport into Shimmering Teleport. We want to have max teleport because we're using the teleport enchantment, and this will allow us to teleport more often, and the shimmering teleport works just fine with the teleport enchantment. Then we max out glass cannon, and then we go for 3 into ice armor. So these 2 points are kind of flex. I just use them to have a little bit more barrier, and if you take it together with the protection, this pretty much makes 100% barrier. And then you go into Mystical Ice Armor. So if you have trouble keeping your Ice Armor up, you can definitely switch this into Shimmering Ice Armor to cast it more often. I feel like at this point I'd rather take the 15% more damage, but if you're struggling, just switch this to Shimmering Ice Armor, no problem. And then we go for 1 into Familiar and 1 into Enhanced Familiar. We don't need any of these passives because we're just going to use the Familiar to apply Burning for us, so these passives really are not going to do anything for us. Then pretty standard Ice Blades into Summoned Ice Blades, Lightning Spear into Invoked Lightning Spear. We get our Protection, we get our Mana Shield, and we max out Conjuration Mastery here. And then we go into Inner Flames and into Devouring Blaze here for the extra crit damage. And 1 into Permafrost, 3 into Hoarfrost, 3 into Elemental Synergies, 3 into Evocation, 1 into Coursing Currents, 3 into Electrocution for the extra damage reduction. Our key passive is going to be Enlightenment, as pretty much always. And then we max out Unstable Currents and go for Prime Unstable Currents for the attack speed. So if you don't want to max Unstable Currents, you might, if you want to play it a little bit different than I do it, you could, for example, use an Orange Herald, and then you would only need 1 point into Unstable Currents. But since I fix my Unstable Currents uptime with the Rune Word, I need the 5 points in here, and it's working great for me. For the skills, we want to spam Ice Blades and Lightning Spear on cooldown. Lightning Spear is pretty much stacking up our Conjuration Mastery, and it's also doing damage with the aspect of Splintering Energy. And Ice Blades as well stack up our Conjuration Mastery and also help a big deal with cooldown reduction. And also, it's gonna help us with keeping up our Enlightenment buff. So since we're always casting Chain Lightning, and then we're casting Ice Blades and Ice Armor, these are two different elements, so these help us stacking up our Enlightenment as fast as possible. Then Flame Shield, for obvious reasons. Unstable Currents, you also want to cast it on cooldown. And again, Chain Lightning is our primary skill, so I use like the numlock trick to cast it automatically, and if you don't know how to do that, just skip to this section of this video. Then for the enchantments, we play Ice Blades enchantment. This just seems to be mandatory for any non-Winterglass build here. It just helps so much with keeping more stacks of Conjuration Mastery and getting more cooldown reduction. And our second slot is Teleport enchantment, just to move around. We don't really want to move in a regular way. All we do to move here is really just use the Teleport enchantment. For the items and uniques, let's first talk about the items, and then we're going to go with the runes later. So first of all, as pretty much in every sorcerer's build, you want to use the Air of Perdition. This thing is just way too strong. It's a 60% damage multiplier, and it also gives you a huge amount of critical strike chance. So you want to go upwards of 40% critical strike chance. So if you have a greater FX crit chance, that is great. You just need to masterwork it once. But if you don't have a greater FX crit chance, you might want to masterwork the crit chance twice if possible. Other stuff can go on core skills, and this build is probably going to be the best. Then we use Raiment of the Infinite. You want to get all masterworkings onto Glass Cannon, and you want to have greater FX Glass Cannon. All other stats really doesn't matter. Obviously, having a greater FX Intelligence is nice, but it doesn't matter all that much. And you can do the Shroud of False Dash if you're like bossing. You will do significantly more damage with the Shroud of False Dash, but this is kind of the all-round setup here. Then for our gloves, we're just gonna use Splintering Energy here. So I will pretty much use Splintering Energy in any build. If you want to go for pure boss damage, you can probably go for Lightning Rod aspect to get a little bit of extra damage. Or you could go for Inner Calm aspect, which is probably going to be even a little bit better. Since we're only teleporting and never moving, Inner Calm has an uptime of 100%. But as I'm making this build for kind of an around build here, I'm going with the Splintering Energy because it really helps in the dungeon phase of Pits and Infernal Hordes a lot. And you want to have a greater FX attack speed, intelligence and critical strike damage, probably the best. You can also go for ranks of Chain Lightning instead of intelligence. And you want to have lucky hit chance to freeze. That is important. We need this. It's a required attribute. And we want to have critical strike damage here. Then for our pants, we go for Axial Conduit. I have a lot of greater affixes here. Most of them don't really matter so much. So the chance for Chain Lightning to hit twice doesn't matter all that much. Chain Lightning ranks do not really matter all that much. Resource generation and maximum is kind of nice to have. So I was pretty lucky to get a 3 times masterwork on it. But you know, if you hit it once or twice, it's definitely going to be enough. But I would focus on a greater affix resource generation maximum here. And most important is the max roll here on the unique ability. So 3, 5, 7, 6 would be the best one. I have 3, 4, 4, 2, so this is pretty nice. So try to aim for like a very high roll on this stat, because a significant amount of damage in this build is coming from the Chain Lightning explosion there. Then we go for Rakanor's Wake. These boots are just way too strong with the non-physical damage, which basically gets tripled. And it gives a lot of all rest, which is pretty difficult to fix. And try to get a greater FX cooldown reduction on these ones. And ideally, you want to masterwork cooldown reduction and not non-physical damage. Then for our weapon, I'm putting the Shredding Blaze aspect on here, and you want to have a lucky hit chance to restore resource either on your weapon or your gloves. It doesn't really matter where you have it, but you need this once. It pretty much fixes most of your mana regeneration, so very important. So I like to have more maximum life. You can also go for intelligence here, but I prefer to have maximum life, crit damage, and even the lucky hit to restore resource. And you want to have chance for Chain Lightning to hit twice and critical strike damage. And ideally, you want to masterwork, I would say, critical strike damage or chance for Chain Lightning to hit twice. These are probably roughly about the same. For the focus, I'm again getting maximum life, critical strike chance, greater FX, and cooldown reduction. Ideally, get a greater FX cooldown reduction, but these are like almost impossible to get. My cooldown reduction is not perfect, so I definitely need more cooldown reduction. I have like a 2 or 3 seconds delay on my unstable currents, so really try, if you can get a greater FX cooldown reduction, that's gonna be great. Also try to get as much master working on cooldown reduction as possible. For the tempering, again, chain lightning to it twice and critical strike damage, and I play the conceded aspect here. You can also play the inner calm aspect, since that's gonna be up all the time. You kind of have to look where you have the best aspect roll and you know how you feel it works best for you. And then we go for Ring of Starless Skies. Try to focus on attack speed. It's nice if you have a greater FX attack speed also. I don't have it, but master working, definitely focus on attack speed and crit here. The other values do not really matter all that much. Then for the Talrasha ring, here again, try to get a greater FX cooldown reduction and try to master work all on cooldown reduction. My master working is pretty scuffed here, but the ring is overall still pretty nice. Try to get as close to 25% as possible. And again, only thing which pretty much matters here is a greater FX cooldown reduction. Obviously, having greater FX non-physical damage is going to be pretty amazing, but you know, you cannot ask for everything, right? And then for the amulet, that's one of the most important slots in this build. Mine is pretty scuffed. I just cannot really find a good one. So ideally, you want to have intelligence, ranks of conjuration mastery, greater FX, and for example, devouring blaze as a passive. So the maximum resource stat here is pretty much dead. In a perfect world, really, greater FX intelligence and greater FX conjuration mastery, and all master working on conjuration mastery. Conjuration mastery is really the strongest in this build. But as you can see, my amulet is actually pretty bad, and I'm still managing to deal with everything just fine. You want to have a temper for total armor here, and you need like roughly like 20%. Mine is pretty bad again, but I don't really want to remaster work this one here. And you want to have critical strike damage, and I put the Stormswell aspect on here. So with the armor here, I have 761, as you can see, just with the 3 scouts here and the armor percent roll. And as soon as I put on the incense here, the what's it called, the Song of the Mountain, I will be at max armor, no problem. So for the runes and gems, first of all, it's critical strike in your weapon and focus. That's pretty much non-debatable. It's going to be all skulls in your armor pieces, so you can reach your armor cap. You're not going to have any issues with resistances, because we use Rakanor's Wake, which pretty much fix our resistance for us. And then for your one remaining armor piece, you definitely want to have Topaz. So let's go for the rune words. So I play Tam Om for the Warcry. So this is definitely a more offensive variant. You absolutely don't have to do this. But I feel like I don't really need the survivability. I get along just fine. So I play this. And then furthermore, I'm going to play the Pok Zack here, which basically gives me cooldown reduction when I spend 200% of my maximum resource. So we are spending a crazy amount of resource in this build, since the pants here, the Axial Conduit pretty much drains resource all the time. So this gives us permanent ultimate uptime. As I already said, mine isn't perfect because I need to get a little bit lower. So probably once you get down to like 24 seconds unstable currents, it's gonna be up permanently. I still have like a little bit of a delay there. So you can definitely do alternate rune choices. So if you're struggling with resource, maybe you don't have the greater FX resource generation or stuff like that, I don't even know, you can definitely go for Pok Lum. This is really going to help a lot with resource. This is going to restore really a lot of resource for you. So if you are struggling, definitely exchange this offensive rune work here, the Tam Om, for a Pok Lum. If you're struggling with survivability, again, you can remove this rune word, Tam Om here, and you can get for Tam Mod here for the Dark Shroud, which gives you a crazy amount of damage reduction. Or if you struggle with Barrier, you can go for the Tam Kwe, which gives you Earth and Bulwark, which also helps a lot with Barrier. For the Paragon, I'm taking a little bit different of a route than I used to do in the Frozen Orb build. So I'm using the Eliminator glyph in my first board here, just because I feel like the alternative you would have here is Flame Feeder, but I feel like this one gives more multipliers. So you get basically 69 intelligence, right, which is probably at this point like roughly like 3 or 4% of a multiplier. Then you get a flat 10% to elites and another, you know, whatever it is, it's just a higher percentage. So my glyphs are like level 75-ish, and you get 11.6. If you want to do Flame Feeder instead, if you look at it, it just gives you an 8% increased damage, and this is the same level. And yeah, you get a little bit of additive damage, but it's also dexterity, which is kind of a dead stat. So I kind of like this one, which giving me all the extra intelligence. And the starter board is very efficient to pick up all these intelligence points. You really don't waste a whole lot. You really just waste this one dexterity here, and then you have these 2 and 1 willpower. So you really just have like an overhead of like 4 nodes here to max out this with intelligence. So I feel like it's a good choice to put Eliminator on this starter board. Then we go over to the next board, which is going to be the fundamental release here for the damage buff. I'm picking up the non-physical damage and vulnerable damage here together with my tactician to boost my non-physical damage as high as possible. I'm picking up these damage reduction nodes from vulnerable because these have maximum life. If I had more points, I would also take these. But in general, I want to rather have maximum life than armor. And I'm picking up the damage to burning here. I feel like I don't really need these flat damage reduction here, but if you have more points to spare, you can definitely also pick these later. Then we're moving over to the static search board here. So the static search node helps quite a bit with, keeping your mana up in the Chain Lightning build, which is crazy mana hungry. I'm getting the maximum life here. I'm getting the maximum life and aura here. And then I put in my destruction glyph here with just 54 dexterity I have. You could go for this node, but I feel like it costs like 4 nodes to just move through this one dexterity node, so I'm kind of not using it at this point. But if you want to get a little bit more crit damage, you can definitely pass over here, but I feel like it's not worth it. And then I'm moving over through this damage to stun cluster and resource cost reduction cluster. I mean, it's decent, 70% extra damage to stun, but it's probably not required. So if you don't have enough points, you might just pass the way through here. Or if you don't want to choose this, you can also pass through here and take this dexterity node if you want to. Then the next board is going to be the Enchantment Master here. And if you don't have points in the beginning, pretty much this entire stuff here is optional. This is just survivability, this is survivability, this is survivability. This I would pick, but all this here is optional if you don't have enough points. We put in our Elementalist glyph here again to boost non-physical damage. And yeah, we pick up all these defensive nodes here. These help with reaching the armor cap. And then moving over to our last board, which is going to be Frigid Fate. I'm not 100% sure if I like to put Frigid Fate as my last board or not, because right now I'm not reaching this last elemental favor. But as soon as I reach 530 dexterity, it's going to be alright, but I don't have it. And there's a good chance you guys are not going to have it as well. But anyway, I'm picking the maximum life nodes here and getting all these nodes here. And I'm putting in my Unleash glyph here again to boost more non-physical damage. So this is going to boost the magic nodes here. And I'm going to pick up this extra vulnerable damage and damage reduction cluster here. For the Mercenaries, I pretty much use Variana always because it gives me attack speed. So I don't really care about the movement speed here or anything. We pretty much care about the Hysteria here, which gives me a flat 10% attack speed bonus. And then additionally with the Bloodthirst here and the Bloodlust, we get another 15% attack speed buff, which is roughly active 33% of the time. So this together with the Enlightenment, which is probably somewhere around, 60 to 70% uptime. I have 100% attack speed most of the time. There will be slight downtimes, but I feel like this setup is the best, and I don't really have a slot on my gear where I could even put on more attack speed, so that's why I always choose the Variana here. And then for the reinforcement, I always use right here with the Bastion here. I put it on my core skill randomly. You can definitely put it on the condition when you get injured if you want to. I feel like I don't really need this. I just put it on my core skill, but you have to play how you like this best. For the breakpoints, first of all, try to get 100% crit. I feel like if you're playing Air of Perdition and Starless Skies, it's not going to be an issue at all. But if you, miss one of these uniques, you can probably get another crit roll on your gloves to get as close to that as possible. And with your focus, you should be able to get as high as possible in crit. So really try to get 100% here. If you have 95%, don't sweat it. The build is going to work just fine. But your goal should be 100%. Then for the attack speed, I'm having 78% here with my elixir. You want to add 10% from the Mercenary, so that's 88.6. So ideally, you want to reach 94.4. for the 22 attack speed, 22 frames per attack, as you can see it on the screen right now. Or if you are not playing a dagger or wand, ideally you want to play a sword, so you have a little bit slower base attack, so your aspect of splintering energy is going to hit a little bit higher, then you want to reach 100%. So I have 78, Enlightenment will add 20, so that's pretty much going to be 100. The Mercenary is going to add 15 a lot of the time, so most of the time I'm going to be above the 94.4, but ideally you probably want to reach more than 94.4 attack speed. So again, we add 10% from the Merc, that's 88, so I'm technically missing like 6% attack speed. So really, if you had like a greater affix, Ring of Starless Skies, it would be good. But you know, having like somewhere around, 75% or higher will work just fine for you. For the consumables, I pretty much always play Elixir of Advantage too, because 15% attack speed is just the best thing I can take out of all the elixirs. And then for the incense, usually I play Raiment Buzz for the extra life. 500 flat life is a huge value, it gives you so much more survivability. And then I use Chorus of War here for the 40 all stats. It helps me to reach the last breakpoints on my Paragon. This is pretty much min-maxing, so if you don't have like so many resources like I have, you can definitely skip this one. This is probably just going to be like 2 or 3% extra damage, if at all. And then most importantly, Song of the Mountain here. We are not maxed out on armor, so as soon as you use Song of the Mountain, you will basically go to like a 1000 armor with this setup. And this is also one of the cheapest incense, so definitely don't skip Song of the Mountain. The other two you can skip, but I would recommend to at least use Raiment Buzz and Song of the Mountain. So for the autocasting, I feel like with the amount of skill spamming builds require these days, I kind of need to have this autocasting, otherwise I cannot really play for like more than 1 or 2 hours, because, my fingers are just gonna hurt if I have to press a key all the time. This is probably not gonna be an issue if you're playing on a controller, because it's way more relaxing to actually hold like a shoulder button on a controller. But if you're playing on a PC with mouse and keyboard, I definitely recommend using this numlock trick. So what we're doing here, as you can see, I have my Chain Lightning here bound on numlock 1. And now I'm just autocasting it. So I basically just use a little trick. So this is basically autocasting all the time, and now I can spam all my other skills, but the Chain Lightning always keeps casting. As you can see, I'm not even running out of mana without doing anything here. So how does this work? You go into your controls options, and what you're going to do is you bind any skill slot on numlock. So you can use any numlock key, numlock 1 to 9. So you just activate numlock and bind this to a key. So how do you activate it now? Basically, you make sure your numlock is on, so your numlock LED is lighting. And then you press your key and hold it to cast the skill. And then you release numlock, and then you release the skill. And now it's going to keep casting forever. And you just pretty much just move with Teleport Enchantment now. So you just keep this skill casting, and all I do is I use Teleport Enchantment to move around. And this is going to keep casting forever, even if you go into inventory, check your stuff. As you can see, this is just going to keep casting. You can even go into like your skill tree and stuff like that. So as you can see, it's always going to keep casting here. And then, how do you stop it again? Well, basically, you just press the key again, and it's going to stop. So to change this from a Raiment of the Infinite speed farming version to a higher single target boss damage version with Shroud of False Death and Frostburn, we basically just gotta do some little adjustments to our build. Basically, we change from the Tam Ohm to Tam Cry, because we want to have the Vortex. Because we are not playing Raiment of the Infinite anymore, and Vortex really helps with grouping the mobs. And I feel like it's, it's much slower actually than Raiment of the Infinite, because you kind of have to wait like 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 seconds for stuff to get grouped up. But you know what? If you want to do a little bit higher pit pushing, it works just fine. And then we obviously include the Shroud of False Death. This thing is just absolutely overpowered. If you get a greater FX all stats, good for you. You want to try to get all master working on all stats. This other stuff doesn't matter. So this is extremely strong. It gives +1 to all passives, which is probably like a 50x more multiplier. And the 392 all stats is just ridiculously strong, and 1160 life is also a huge amount of life. So what does this? This enables you to basically skip life on your weapons. So I still have it on here and I still have it on here. But technically, now I don't even need the critical strike chance on my focus anymore, because this just gives so much dexterity that just with this, my crit chance is 94.6, which I'm actually calling a day. So you can get greater FX intelligence on your focus, and you can also get greater FX intelligence on your wand or sword. Other than that, really nothing is changing. We just put Frostburn then, as already said. So we're going to get rid of Lightning Spear, poor Lightning Spear, but we're not going to use it anymore. So we're going to switch it to Frostburns, because these just have this nice fire and cold damage and attack speed in a very, very high roll. And the lucky hit damage really matters if you are facing larger hit point mobs like bosses or higher pit tiers. So if you masterwork this, just try to get all on the lucky hit stats. It doesn't matter which one, if you have 3 on 1 or like, you know, distributed across, just get these. And you know, mine has a pretty low lucky hit chance, but I picked this up for cheap on Diablo.trade because, you know, I really don't have the highest stagger now for tormented bosses, but I feel like it doesn't really matter. If you can get higher lucky hit chance, you're just gonna stagger significantly faster. But this is all the changes to the build, and then we have one more change to the build, which is actually in the skill tree. So we want to have precision magic now for more lucky hit, because, you know, the Frostburns obviously need lucky hit, and they just took 2 points out of Ice Armor and 1 out of Teleport here. And then we're making one more tiny change to the Paragon, since we want to get the lucky hit now on the Frigid Fate board. So I'm just picking this lucky hit now nodes here, and I basically just removed some vulnerable damage. I just removed this cluster here, saves me a couple of points, and I distributed it into these ones here, and as well I just got some extra damage reduction. So the planner is going to be in the description for this one as well, and this one is so freaking tanky, you're not even gonna die. You can even stand like in the poison explosions, just no problem.